like to call the meeting of the Cumru Township Planning Commission to order. Please rise for a pledge for the flag. The first thing I'd like to do is welcome Joe Rowland to the Planning Commission. Thank you for your interest in volunteering, and hopefully we make it worthwhile and interesting. And we have nobody here for public comment, so we'll move on. The next item is approving the minutes. We have December 1st of 2025 minutes. Unfortunately, we do not have enough people here that were at that meeting. So I guess we'll have to do what we've done to other minutes that we've not had enough people here, which is to archive them, correct? Thank you. The January 15th minutes, we also don't have enough people here to approve those. We might have one show up. No, I guess we don't have enough. We needed
if Keith shows up, then we can approve December, right?
That's right. I even wrote down notes for this just so it doesn't help. Okay, moving on. The correspondence. Berks County Blighted Property Review Committee has, I guess, provided official notice of blight to 303 Summit Avenue, and that was dated January 9th of 26. Very good. Before we get to that.
Okay, well, we can talk about this while he gets, I think you're over here now, sir, if you don't mind. I just included that because of the last time when they asked us to, fill out a paperwork. This is the very first step for this property. So this is when they determined that it is a notice of blight. So this is the first thing that was sent to the homeowners, and then from there it'll begin the whole process. So the last time we had the end of the process where we had to do our certification of the property, which I apologize. That other property not only was in an estate situation, but there had also been a fire there, which is why they did not have the utilities. So that was sent to all the proper people for the blighted, and this is just the first stage, but I thought, especially with a lot of new people and stuff, that way we're on board with what all this process steps are. So,
alrighty, thank you, Patty. We're gonna now go back to the December 1st, 2025 minutes and approval. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
I move to approve.
A second? All those in favor, say aye.
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 None opposed. So those minutes are actually approved. Under other business, we have listed a discussion of the importance and use of the zoning saldo and municipal planning code. I think I'd like to table that discussion until we have Bruce Bagley, who's our other new member, until he's in attendance, and if we have any newly appointed other members, I think we'll wait until we have more of those folks attending, so we don't have to do it multiple times. If everybody's okay with that.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, moving
Still
on.
looking for additional members? I have somebody, Michael Esser. He lives on Imperial Road. He may be interested.
okay, if you wouldn't mind, give him my email, and if you could set a letter of intent and or any kind of resume or letter saying that. What I was doing was then I was putting that on the commissioner's tablets, and it will be on the next Board of Commissioner meeting. So that way then they have a background story for who's being proposed. Also, maybe at this time I should say that it was not really a letter or anything, but after I sent out the stuff on Friday, the response from Alan Gibson was to take him off the roster. So I think that means that he has resigned from the planning commission. So we will have another position. And there was a letter of intent sent. So I put that on the commissioner's tablet so far. But the other problem, again, is our alternates. These alternates do not attend. And I think the one might have moved like to Florida. So we don't even have backup. So I think that's going to become an issue too. So maybe we even need to put down the alternates. I'd like to talk to Kelsey about what to do about that. Since, you know, the one person attended once, the other one hasn't attended at all since being appointed. So they're holding a spot and then sometimes I can't get a quorum. So I'm not sure exactly what we need to do about that. I need to defer to Kelsey a little bit.
Yeah, we can talk about it. I want to look at the MPC in the First Class Township Code and see if because of their absenteeism, they can be removed and replaced.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patty. Okay, next order of business, the proposed changes to the zoning ordinance and zoning map. We have two proposed changes. We'll take the first one, the data centers. There's a proposed overlay district boundary, what's called the final draft, and then we also have a sample from Lower Saucon Township in Northampton County, who's also going through the same process. Kelsey, has the public hearing been scheduled by the Board of Commissioners?
It has not been scheduled yet. They wanted to get this before the Planning Commission and get it to the County Planning Commission. In fact, this particular draft of the data center overlay amendment was kind of just finalized last week. So they wanted to get everybody's response and recommendations before we even scheduled it.
Okay, that's great. So that we have the time between now and the next meeting to take a look at it and formulate any kind of thoughts about it.
Yeah, and I think the plan was in order to kind of save costs and try to get these done at the same hearing, on the same hearing date, the two separate amendments.
Okay, so given the fact that the TND is in really draft condition, so in other words, there's no hurry for the data center then.
Yeah, correct.
Perfect. Okay. Are there in general, and thank you to Steve and to Kelsey and I don't remember his name.
I think was it Mark Robinson? It was Robinson was the last name. Dave. Yeah, I did speak with him on the phone. Very nice gentleman. Very knowledgeable. He was very helpful. Evidently he's a resident in the township.
Okay. Have you had a chance, Steve, to look at the Lower Saucon one?
I have not. When this came to me initially, which I don't know if it was a month or two ago, and just to backtrack a little bit, I'm not quite sure how the data center thing came up as an issue to you know, the impetus behind it, to add it. I think it's a good idea. Since I don't attend commissioners, Joe handles that. So I think it was through Kelsey and also Commissioner Miller reached out to me, and at some point I was sent kind of a bunch of sample ordinances, and you know, we kind of all went through them and went back and forth, but I did not go through that one specifically. I can, Barb, I just haven't had a chance to do that yet. But we have had a bunch of them to kind of pull from, and that's kind of where how we ended up where we're at.
Sure, that's fine. I mean, that just came in, so it certainly is understandable. I haven't looked at it either.
One thing that jumped out at me is the Lower Saucon says 10 acres and ours is saying 75 acres.
You know, that's interesting. I had a discussion with I believe it was I think it was Mr. Robinson, because in some of the earlier iterations of the draft ordinance, you know, there was you know, a separate I don't want to say a separate use, but there was a separate consideration for data center campuses. And there was a question for me as, okay, the 70 acres, was that kind of a contemplation of that being a minimum for a parent tract, whereas that would get subdivided into smaller lots, and you'd have almost like an industrial complex with multiple data centers within that, within that overall parent tract. And according to Dave, a lot of these data centers kind of start with one building and then kind of grow over the course of time. And he wasn't as familiar with the zoning ordinance, the current zoning ordinance, where we have a stipulation in it that basically says if you have more than one principal building, you need a separate lot for it. Now, we have had precedent over the years where we've allowed multiple principal buildings on the same lot, provided that the applicant can demonstrate that a theoretical lot could be provided. So, without adding a whole additional section on data center campuses, the way that it is right now, each data center would require 70 acres, which I do think is problematic, because I think that's way too big and is not going to hold up, and Kelsey and Barb can probably speak to that, because from what I understand, and just so you all know, I was relatively ignorant to the data center use, prior to me getting into this. So I'm kind of learning on the fly, just like everybody else is. But it's my understanding that, there's a lot of data centers out there that are, relatively small, that aren't on lots anything close to 70 acres. So I do think that is something that's going to have to be probably dialed back.
Yeah,
I agree with you, Steve. That was one of my questions is there even any properties large enough in Cumru Township to accommodate? And if not, we're going to get a challenge in court.
the two I
exclusionary.
saw are the landfill and Recycle America. The landfill is about 200 acres and the other one is about 200 acres as well. So those are the only two in the overlay district that would meet the 75 acre requirement.
And I don't think they're going to be able to build on a landfill once it's closed because of all the various.
You know what? Interestingly, I did look up the recommissioning of landfills for the purposes of data centers, and it does appear that it has been done. And I get the fact that you can draw, gas, and basically run generators from the gas for the power generation. It isn't inconceivable that a dump would be recommissioned into a use like that. But I was thinking the same thing. But again, it's just something that I kind of learned. And you just do a Google search and your AI comes up and it gives you all this information. But evidently, it's not inconceivable.
That's interesting, actually. I do have one comment on section 5. If I can find it here. I have 5D. One of them was there seemed to be some words missing.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're just some words missing from that one.
What section specifically, Barb?
Page 6.
On page 6, that subsection D near the bottom. I mean, I understand that the word about is probably should be a but it didn't make sense to me. I just wanted to point that out so there was no confusion.
Rich, that's the Lower Saucon one that you're looking at that says Northampton.
Thank you. No, that's fine. I'm glad that everybody's looking at them closely. And Rich, you had some questions or comments?
I have a kind of unique perspective on this whole thing. And if you have a couple of minutes, I'd like to kind of ramble on here. I used to be the county architect for Berks County. And one of my projects was doing the computer center for Berks County, as well as the 911 communications center. They are very similar to what we're talking about with respect to a data center. Let me just give you a little bit of information. Even a small mainframe computer gives off a tremendous amount of heat. Now that isn't so much of a problem because there's other pieces of equipment that compensates for the heat. The mainframe has to work in a very narrow window of temperature, as well as controlled humidity, which a lot of people wouldn't realize. The equipment that is used to back up the mainframe computer is also very expensive. It takes a lot of electrical power to run. It's also very, very important that all this equipment is backed up, either with battery backups or backup generators, and it has to work. If it doesn't, there are serious problems with the computer operation, and it just leads to a lot of other problems. My main concern about something like this is not so much those technical items there, but looking at it from a perspective, a fire perspective. The reason that they use equipment that controls the humidity is to keep sparks and so forth, static electricity down in that particular room. If this catches fire, the elements of the computer system, many of them are very, very hazardous if they catch fire. They are also very difficult to put out. You can't just have a normal sprinkler system in a room like this or a building like this. It really requires what's called a halon system, and they act very much like a bomb. As soon as that detects a certain amount of heat, this thing goes off. The halon essentially removes all the oxygen in that particular room, and you do not want to be in that room when that goes off. I mean, you're dead. That's what happens. These things are a particular concern, and if a fire does continue in there, these elements do give off hazardous fumes. It's something that not every fire department is familiar with, and there are only a few people that I know of that address this type of situation. I've been to the State Fire Training Center up at Lewistown already and heard people talk about this. It's not something that you want to address. It is very, very dangerous. I have some real reservations about even trying to put a data center like this in Cumru Township, particularly in the location that we're talking about, close to a high-density residential area, a hospital, an elderly retirement center. This is of grave concern to me. I don't know that we have the people. I would have to ask the fire chief if he has people trained to address this type of situation.
Rich, I apologize if I'm misunderstanding. We had a couple different maps here. I just want to make sure that you're understanding which map is associated with which amendment here. This is the map that's associated with the proposed data center overlay, which is pretty much isolated. The overlay district would be isolated to the area around the Titus station. I think you might have been looking at the mapping for the TND, the traditional neighborhood district, traditional neighborhood development overlay, which obviously is close to all the things that you're concerned about. So this is the map that we're talking. So the area is relatively limited. I'm not trying to say that your concerns aren't otherwise, valid. I just want to make sure that we're all looking at the same map.
I know this was talked about for the site where the warehouse was previously proposed. That would be a horrible location. I really don't see a good location in Cumru Township for a facility like this. It's too close to residential areas.
I think the problem is because it's a legal use, it has to be permitted somewhere in the township because we don't have joint zoning with another township where it would otherwise be permitted. But I'll let the lawyers jump in here to correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that there was a decision made to try to implement this zoning ordinance specific to data centers is to make sure that there are a lot of regulations in place to regulate what these developers would need to do if they were to construct a data center as a permitted use in that district. And if you look at paragraphs, I think 14 and 15 of the ordinance, there are a lot of emergency management planning provisions, fire provisions and fire safety provisions. So I think the goal of the board was to ensure that if someone did want to come and put a data center in, it wouldn't just be requesting a variance and not having all of these conditions having to go on that data center property, so that it is heavily regulated and they're required to demonstrate that they can comply with all of those different provisions.
Quite honestly, the only place that I've seen where a data center has been proposed is up at Limerick. They already have the fire equipment and so forth in place to handle a fire of that type of nature. You do not want to go into a room where there are hazardous fumes coming off of electrical equipment and try and put that thing out. I mean, you're talking about people with respirator packs and specific halon types of fire extinguishers at the very least.
Yeah, and I can't say I'm familiar with any of the technical stuff that you're talking about. And I do understand your concerns. I think they're valid, but data centers, let's face it, they're here and they're not going anywhere. So if we want to make sure that we have as much regulation on them as we legally can to protect the health, safety, and welfare of any residents or any emergency personnel who may have to respond to a situation like that, we should do it with regulations that are in writing that people need to abide by. And I think that was the goal of trying to create this overlay district, to give them developers a place to put it in the township that makes the most sense based on density and where those districts are.
I can only speak from my past experience. The county computer system was in the old courthouse, and we did use a halon bomb in that particular situation to help protect the equipment. It was a very, very small mainframe computer compared to what would happen in a data center. I'm imagining that there's probably hundreds of mainframes connected together for a data center.
And Rich, I think the concerns you're bringing up is the reason I think that this ordinance was proposed, because right now, if an applicant were to come in and propose a data center, it would have to be permitted in the general industrial zoning district under our current catch-all for quote undefined uses, and in which case it would be permit. I guess I think it's by condition, but it wouldn't be limited to just this area. It would be pretty much anywhere in the current GI district. So I think, kind of dovetailing on what, Kelsey was, getting at, we're actually trying to do this to more fully protect the township. Unfortunately, it's a relatively modern use that we're all kind of, I mean, you probably know more than all of us about it, from a technical perspective. So we're just kind of looking at it more of a protection, from a zoning perspective than anything else.
Well, if nothing else, I'd like to see it written such that the scale of the data center is relatively small. I think that would be manageable from a municipal perspective, particularly from the fire chief's perspective.
I would defer to the attorneys on how much you can, dictate the scale of a use. I know in other uses such as solar farms, for an example, a township wanted to basically dictate the maximum size of a solar farm, and that was shot down by multiple attorneys that you can't really restrict the size. You can I might be misunderstanding, but I'll let Barb and Kelsey.
I think part of, in reading through this again, just doing a brief reading, there are a lot of built-in factors such as setbacks and things like that are going to limit the size as well, rather than a specific number. I think it's self-limiting, I guess, by the ordinance. Also, has Chief Bean been involved in any discussions at all?
And again, this is a good conversation because part of your job is to recommend how this should move forward. And if your recommendation is, well, let's talk to the fire chief and see if he wants anything included in the ordinance related to fire, specifically when it comes to what's inside a data center, that's a great recommendation. And I think that the Board of Commissioners would absolutely agree with that. The same thing with the acreage, the lot side. So yeah, I mean, if we want to get a list of all of those issues and maybe make a formal letter to the Board of Commissioners indicating all of the recommendations and issues that were brought up, I think, that's a good starting spot.
Can we see, Patty, can we see if we can get a copy of it to Chief Bean? Anything else on the data centers?
And I don't think that the Flying Hills warehouse area is showing as in here, so at least we don't have that residential concern.
That property was included in the TND, the other zone, the other amendment that's proposed. So that's correct.
Anything else on the board until the next meeting?
Can I actually talk about that particular area? I've had a problem with the warehouse zoning for a long time. The Berks County Planning Commission in their comprehensive plan labels that as rural conservation. If we go back and look at the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code, it says that the municipal zoning should be consistent with that of the county's comprehensive plan, which it is not. I do have a problem with that area being zoned general industrial. I really think it should be rural conservation. And I would really defer to the Berks County Planning Commission in this particular case, because they do this on a day-to-day basis. They have full-time people who do nothing but planning and zoning. The topography and a number of other issues there really don't lend itself to industrial type of zoning. There are a number of other problems there, which I don't want to go into at the moment, but I'd really like to see a recommendation to the commissioners to change that zoning back to rural conservation.
I believe part of that is what is involved with the lawsuit that's going on right now.
I believe that's the case, right? Kelsey, it is that property on 10 abutting Flying Hills.
That's correct. It's the Route 10 Realty property, and that is currently in litigation. Actually, the Commonwealth Court just issued a memorandum opinion, I believe it was yesterday. They reversed the trial court's decision and remanded it back to the trial court to make a decision on the underlying merits of the land use appeal. So originally, the trial court had entered an order remanding it back to the zoning hearing board and then vacated that order and remanded it back to a referee instead of the zoning hearing board, to have further hearings with respect to whether that zoning should have ever been changed. And the Commonwealth Court said, nope, you can't do that. We're reversing that order and we're remanding it back to you to actually have argument on the merits of the appeal. The record's complete.
Can we go on record to recommend that we?
What does that mean? That seemed like it went all over the place and I didn't know what that meant. Sorry.
Well, it's hard to explain. I'm not sure what your question is, but it's back before the trial court, the Berks County Court of Common Pleas judge. She will have to schedule oral argument on the underlying zoning appeal, starting with in the Commonwealth Court really wanted the trial court to first focus on standing, especially with respect to a few of the parties. So she's gonna have to they're gonna have to brief everything again or resubmit the briefs that they already had filed. And she's gonna have to have argument and make another decision, which again could get appealed by either party.
So it's in litigation, in other words. Short answer, it's in litigation for who knows how long.
Would it be out of order for us to recommend it to be rezoned back to rural conservation at this point?
Right now, because it's in litigation and I'm not sure how long that litigation will last, I don't think anybody is. I wouldn't recommend it. There is a stay on the I know that the parties, and again, forgive me because I can't even see the docket. I depend on other parties to send me information because the Board of Commissioners withdrew their intervention in that lawsuit, which means the township itself is not a party. They're not filing anything. They're not participating. So it's hard for me to get information and see all those things. But I do believe that the parties a while back entered into an agreement to stay the land development process on that property and to not take further action with respect to that particular area.
So then, Kelsey, wouldn't it be problematic then that we're including that area in this overlay district amendment that's going to include that parcel?
It depends. If all of the parties to the litigation see this ordinance and
Are agreeable.
and are agreeable to it, that could,
Because there's no doubt about it that this overlay district ordinance would make that property even more developable. It already was changed from RC to GI, and now this overlay is going to allow it to be developed into basically, a higher density residential and mixed use. Now I don't particularly have, an opinion one way or the other, but I was just trying to understand so as long as they're agreeable, both sides, it could potentially be changed to, okay.
correct, yep.
Any other discussion on the data center? I know, Reggie. No, we're here to discuss these kinds of things. So, open dialogue is what we need to do.
Out of curiosity, who is responsible for the installation of the traffic light?
I wasn't involved in the in the early planning and the zoning change and all that went on with that. I don't. At some point, the developer, it was originally, I think his name is Brian Johnson. Is that right? Mail Shark. And it was odd in terms of the sequencing. Typically, the PennDOT improvements, in this case, the signal and realignment of Freemansville Road and Route 10. That would happen in conjunction with the development. And for some reason there was, kind of a, I hate to call it a deal because I don't want to imply that anything was, out of sorts, but, I don't know. It is the short answer, but it was atypical, I would say.
I could probably help a little bit. When I first started here, well, this was, very fresh. And, I had seen that when they had done different traffic studies and stuff, that intersection had been on a future development plan. So it was already on a future development plan as a concern. And so when it got proposed to the township, my understanding is that yes, the developer paid for the improvements, but it wasn't kind of in left field. It had already been on a proposed plan from previously. I don't know how far.
I think what Patty is referring to is the Act 209 plan, which is also referred to as a traffic impact ordinance plan, or, which identifies, capital improvements for off-site traffic improvements. Whereas if you pass this ordinance, you have to have a whole bunch of underlying studies conducted, and then ultimately that you develop a traffic impact fee, and that fee is imposed on developers for off-site improvements. And I believe that the signal was one of the capital improvements identified in that plan, and I believe that capital improvements plan was prepared by Spot Stevens and McCoy back in 2001, maybe. It was 25 years ago.
Right. So this was a previous thing. So it was already on the list. And then when this started going forward, that's, I think, how it got a little bit of a fast track, so to speak, because it was already identified on a list.
I'll give you my personal experience with traffic lights. On over 100 land development plans that I've done in the course of my career that required a traffic light, I never once was given the permit for a traffic light until the land development plan was approved by the municipality. This traffic light does not meet the warrants for an installation of a traffic light, obviously. And I don't know if it ever will.
You might be right, because I do believe that it was approved based on the anticipated development. And I would 100% agree with you that, that is typically how it goes. You don't get the permit until the plan's approved.
Can we make a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners to remove the traffic light?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that traffic light is gonna, PennDOT would have to weigh in on that and approve that, and there would have to be other traffic studies done for the removal, right, Steve?
Yeah, that would be new territory for me. I'm not a traffic engineer, but I mean, I've never seen a traffic signal be moved. I mean, if you would want to have that conversation with PennDOT, I mean, we could at least ask, I guess. But I've never seen that before.
I've heard of it done before. Obviously, at this point, the traffic light would not meet the warrants for an installation. There simply clearly is not enough traffic coming out of that intersection to warrant its location.
I don't know what all the warrants were. I don't know if it was all just traffic generation related. I don't know if there was an accident history that was a component of it. I'd probably have to have Joe from my office, who's more traffic oriented, to look at that and even determine. They might need to go out and do updated counts to confirm that it absolutely doesn't. And even if you prove to PennDOT that it doesn't meet those warrants that signal was approved under, PennDOT Road, and so is Freemansville Road. So ultimately, they would be the ones that would need to agree to have it being removed. I just don't know what that process is exactly. I'd need to talk to Joe.
And I think it would be at a great cost to the township because the township would have to pay for that if and when it would happen. I mean, that's a heck of a fee. I am not an engineer. I am not a traffic person, but people can actually turn left for the very first time out there without any kind of, fear of taking your life in your hands. And making Freemansville Road bringing that intersection to more of a, you know, a cross, as they say. It, you know, it really did save some issues because Freemansville Road used to come to a very weird angle and the site was very difficult out there to drive and to actually make a left-hand turn either out of there or the other side. You know, it was very difficult. So I do think that maybe that's part of the reason, maybe it was on the plan to begin with, like of an improvements plan.
Rich, be carefully ask for PennDOT might turn it into a traffic circle.
You might be right. Since there aren't too many people here, this is off the record. I've done a couple of, okay, it's on YouTube. Well, anyway, I've done a couple of projects with District 50 in Allentown. It is the only district of PennDOT that I have ever had problems with. There's been some very shady types of goings on at District 50, and I certainly don't appreciate it. The people that I worked for didn't appreciate it either. And I get the understanding in talking to other people who do land development plans as well, that this is more of the norm than the exception. So I am very skeptical about how this whole thing came about in the first place.
Thank you, Rich. I guess as a planning commission, I think there's some reluctance to question this as a commission. However, you're a resident, you know, you're out there, you can always appear, you know, as an individual, as a concerned, you know, resident with the Board of Commissioners too. I guess that's what I can suggest. I don't think that the planning commission wants to make any recommendations at this time. And it may be a factor that comes up if this overlay is, you know, I don't know how it would affect the overlay as well. So it may not be the, you know, the worst, but I think that's what that's a position we can take tonight.
Well, I appreciate that. That's fine. I mean, typically for the installation of a traffic signal, you have to do a traffic study and map out the turning movements that are going to occur at this particular signal. Obviously, there isn't enough traffic there to meet the warrants, the PennDOT warrants for a signal. I'm really very, very surprised that this happened in the first place.
That's okay. The other proposed changes is the traditional neighborhood development, the TND, which would you know, is going to require changes to the map and as well as an amendment to the zoning ordinance. I think it's pretty much in its infancy at this point. I'm not sure if we can comment a lot unless Kelsey or Steve have any comments or any of the other commission members have comments.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that this ordinance needs a lot of work, a lot more than what we've looked at with the data center overlay districts. I mean, you can see all the comments that have gone back and forth between Steve and the consultants. I haven't had a chance to look at their responses to your comments yet, Steve, because I think this only came in Friday or something.
Yeah, late Friday.
Yeah, so I think it might be a better idea for everybody to take their time and go through the comments. And if there is a new iteration of this draft between now and the next meeting, that will certainly be provided to the planning commission, because I think there will be some revisions, and I know Steve did a lot of work on this.
Yeah, and yeah, I had a chance over the weekend to go through the responses that we got on Friday, and frankly, I'm gonna have a whole lot more comments based on the responses that we had. And again, just to reiterate, you know, I wasn't involved in, you know, how the TNDI concept came up, which again, that's fine. So I'm only saying that so you all understand that, my primary intent in reviewing this is, just kind of to make sure that whatever we're adopting, we can mitigate any ambiguity and, conflicts with the current zoning ordinance as much as possible, just so, we can implement it and enforce it. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm coming from. And then there's still a lot, obviously, that we have to sort out. So I think I would recommend that we kind of all go through it. You guys have a chance, a reasonable chance to kind of digest, what's been proposed, and then, kind of go through the comments, and then, maybe we can all have a better understanding of what's going on, by the next meeting.
Yeah, and for the record, I'd echo Steve. I wasn't involved in the creation of the initial draft either. This was sent to both of us by the board. So this is kind of, we're kind of starting from scratch on this too.
Steve, thanks for, I kind of glanced over this today, and you did a heck of a lot of comments, and I really want to thank you for all the efforts you put into this.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You're welcome.
Buildings are going to be 40 to 60 feet high, which sounds pretty high to put in a mixed use area. I don't know offhand, but that just seems pretty high to me. And I'm wondering too, because I know Mr. Whitman, we had approved apartment subdivision on one of the overlay district areas that's showing on here, and I don't know how that affects his approval already with this changing to a mixed use overlay.
Yeah, he'd be grandfathered into the prior, whatever the zoning ordinance said before we would adopt any new amendment to the map or to the ordinance. So his plans would remain intact.
Which one are you referring to there, Kelsey and Bev? That sketch plan that was proposed?
I think it was John Hoffer came in, and it was like,
Or the one several years ago up in Deerfield?
No, this is the newer apartment complex off of Valley Stream Road.
Yeah, that was never submitted though formally, was it? That was just a sketch plan. And I speculate that, see, they had a number of other issues with that due to wetlands and streams. And I mean, it's a tough site to develop, because of, I think, some of the concerns that Rich was alluding to, just the steep slopes and a number of other things. So they never actually submitted a formal plan, from what I understand. But now, that property would be included, I guess, I think, isn't that right? Yeah, it would be.
yeah, and if their plan.
So again, I mean, this could potentially make it more developable. And, one of the questions that I had that I probably need to articulate is, I think there was a kind of a general comment in the draft here for the TND that basically says, if there's conflicting requirements, that, this would supersede, the current zoning requirements, but I'm not quite sure what that means. Obviously, if this one says you need a setback of 10 feet and the other one means 20, okay, well, then you take the 10, but this overlay district doesn't really have anything addressing specific environmental restrictions, for example. So what does that mean? Does that mean that you disregard the environmental restrictions in the current zoning ordinance because this doesn't have any in it? I'm not quite sure. And it might be as simple as saying, yeah, they still apply, if it's not specifically conflicting, but some of those questions need to be answered among a handful of others.
I echo Bev's comments, Steve. Thank you for the work you've done so far and the comments that you provide, and it's invaluable.
Thank you a lot. Thank you.
I actually like the mixed use type of zoning. I think it's been long overdue, particularly since we don't have a lot of industrial land to kind of lean on to generate taxes in the township. I think it's a good solution.
Rich, you're saying generally with the idea of the TND. Okay. And one of the things I didn't do was, several years ago, I think it was 2021, 2022, the township did make an attempt. They created a new zoning district. I think it was called the mixed use general commercial. I didn't take the effort to kind of compare that to what's being proposed here. I kind of assumed that was something that was already considered in the process, with the consultant that's helping out here. But, to your point, Rich, I think, I think there is a realization that, a mixed use, that would be great. I think, the hard part is trying to figure out exactly where and how.
The real area that concerns me is Lancaster Avenue. To be able to do that type of construction, we really need adequate fire protection. I know the fire chief brought up the fact that there's a very, very small water line going along Lancaster Avenue.
That's one of the major issues in that corridor, Rich. And the other issue, which is probably a little bit more hard to kind of visualize, is there's a stream that kind of runs down kind of parallel with Lancaster Avenue. That's most of it's underground, but it has a regulated floodplain associated with it. So it also has a regulated floodway associated with it. So really trying to develop in that area, you're automatically having to deal with the FEMA requirements, which is something that's probably turned off a lot of smaller developers just having to deal with that issue along with the fire protection.
Just to bring it up, you raised that question about fire, and it was brought up before the Board of Commissioners, is that, for example, on Hilgert Avenue, there was insufficient water to fight a fire that occurred at one of the houses up there a couple of weeks ago, and that the folks there don't have any water pressure if they don't have a pump in their basements or any way to pump the water. So your concern is very well taken about the water and the fire suppression. It's really lacking right now.
Well, obviously you need an adequate volume of water as well as an adequate amount of pressure to operate a sprinkler system. There are other ways around it. You can put a holding tank in with a fire pump. That is very, very expensive and not a practical solution for a lot of the areas that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think the most practical solution in terms of water supply, particularly fire protection, is a large main, a relatively decent sized main going down along that corridor. I think, that's really the solution. I agree.
The borough of Shillington owns a lot of that pipeline along Lancaster Avenue, correct?
Shillington's down there, and I think there's a decent sized Western Berks line that goes down, I think maybe closer to farther east, closer to Shillington, Montrose Boulevard, maybe in that area, maybe a little bit beyond that. But there's a gap from there then, kind of west down towards Palos or southwest.
Yeah, even for like smaller apartment buildings now, you're required to put sprinklers in. So this is a problem that I see as the main problem of being able to develop that area. If we could encourage the commissioners to speak with Shillington about doing something with the water line, that would help spur development in that area for sure.
I think that's a valid point, Rich, and hopefully it has taken place or will take place. Anything else on TND? All righty, moving on, under the reminders, there's a zoning hearing board hearings on the 24th of February. One is a continuance for 205 Church Road. That's the group home that wants to expand. I understand they need to come back. They asked for continuance because they may have some issues with the parking that need to be straightened out. Another one is at 602 Harding Avenue, seeking a special exception to operate a group home for 2 adults. I'm not sure why the zoning officer denied the permit application. Evidently, it wasn't sufficient, so that's on the agenda. And then 1622 Wyomissing Road, to allow a private dog kennel on the property, property split between Cumru and Brecknock. Kennels are always a pretty hot button item, so I think there'll probably be interest in that one. Anything else on those? Sure.
So am I speaking that, okay. If I'm looking at that property correctly, because I went out there and actually, it appears to me that there is a kennel. So are they wanting to add something to the existing building? And when it says private, does that mean it's not commercial and it's not boarding? It's not a boarding facility and not a commercial facility. It's just for their own use.
I'm gonna defer to Patty because I think she has the zoning hearing application, which would most likely include what existing uses are already on the property, which may or may not already be some sort of kennel. I know that they got zoning approval from Brecknock, but I don't think that they constructed a kennel based on that approval. They did.
What happened was, that's how it came to Cumru's attention. Some people complained, and then that's when we found out that they had gone to Brecknock and did not come here. And then they were told that they had to come here, so it's kind of taken pretty much time. I mean, I know there's been discussion in the background. So my understanding is they had built something, and I'm not sure if it's being used at this time or if they had to stop the construction. I'm not sure exactly where that stands. Codes would know better, but that's why they're here today, is because it was approved but in Brecknock and not in ours. And then, it came under the radar, so to speak. So
Is any portion of the kennel located on the Cumru side of that lot?
from what I understand, I think the kennel itself might be in the part that is technically in Brecknock, but because the property is taxed in Cumru, they were supposed to come to Cumru and get, the zoning relief. So that's why they're coming here now. And I do believe that it is a business. So again, I don't know what classification that comes under, but it is a business. So they have home business, different classifications, which I don't know about that.
And I do know that there have been at least 2 residents who have come before the planning commission and before the board of commissioners at their meeting, at least on 2 occasions, I think, complaining about the kennel and indicating that they don't understand how it could get built without Cumru's approval and that they're not happy with it there.
Well, years back, I actually looked at opening a boarding facility in Brecknock, and there was a 20 at that time there was a 25-acre minimum to do so. So I'm confused if this is going to be a commercial facility. I'm confused how it would be allowed.
Well, they probably applied for a variance from that provision of the zoning ordinance, and I think that's what occurred, that they went to Brecknock zoning hearing board, and Brecknock, that board granted them that variance request, most likely. And I'm just saying, that's my thought. I don't know for sure, because I wasn't
think
part of that.
that's the second part, the special exception to allow a private dog kennel on the property. So
Right, that's in Cumru though. We're talking
Right.
about what happened in Brecknock that would have allowed them
right.
to have that in Brecknock.
It very well may have met Brecknock's ordinance, and Brecknock, they may not have been aware too of. I don't want to say the applicant was not forthcoming, but perhaps they didn't understand the whole request.
But you're right, it's not allowed. That's why we have a special exception now, because it's not allowed under Cumru zoning.
Just as a matter of procedure, in the course of my career, whenever I had an issue with zoning, it was always presented to the planning commission for a recommendation, either for or against, before it went to the zoning hearing board.
And that's why it's
we're
on the
doing this.
agenda.
That's why we're doing it.
So I'm not sure if you remember, but probably, I don't know, 3 months ago, maybe 4 months ago, we started having the conversation of the fact that a lot of zoning hearings were occurring without this commission being able to see the application or to make any recommendations to the Board of Commissioners about whether this commission believes that, the board should object to the application, object with certain stipulations, recommend approval, or just stay out of it. And so that's why these are now showing up on your agenda, so that if you have a feeling a certain way, you can make a motion or talk to the commission and have the commission make a motion to make a recommendation one way or another to the Board of Commissioners.
Anything else in those?
A couple more comments. I apologize to jump back on this. It occurred to me once I looked at the maps for the TND issues. When I would recommend that when the PC goes through the TND draft, they kind of take a close look at there's two areas. And I just want to make sure everyone understands this. The area, there's an area identified as Area 3, which is kind of around the Penske area and a little bit, south and north of that, but kind of centered around Penske's campus. And then Area 4, there is no Area 1 and 2. I'm not. Again, I wasn't privy to the study or whatever that was done to kind of come up with this, but Area 4 is the area of basically Sherland Forest and also the warehouse site just north of the Flying Hills. So those are two areas that are being considered for this TND overlay. So without me being privy to any of that discussion or study, I was a little curious about Area 3, as it includes a lot of areas that are already developed, and it includes quite a bit of area that's, in my opinion, probably undevelopable due to environmental constraints, whether it's wetlands, steep slopes, and please keep in mind in Area 3, the mapping, that red line that bisects the light area that's been highlighted for the overlay limits, that's the district boundary. So approximately half the area there is in Robinson Township and wouldn't be a part of the overlay. So you kind of have some areas that are sort of, landlocked, for lack of a better term. But, I guess I question kind of the developability of some of those areas. But again, I don't know exactly what the intent was. That's not, again, not in a critical way, but maybe something we want to keep in mind, because maybe people have other thoughts that kind of clear me up a little bit there.
Areas 1 and 2 were Montrose Manor and Goglersville. And these were the areas that the commissioners approved. Now, my question with this being split, like we have with the special zoning, because of its split with Robinson, if this mixed use does get developed, do they also have to then go to Robinson to get approval for these mixed use, if it's a developable area?
They'll have to go through Robinson to get approved for whatever's done in Robinson. So that wouldn't, just because they can do mixed use in Cumru wouldn't preclude them from having, they'd still be required to get approval for whatever they're doing in Robinson. That doesn't mean Robinson might not, give them a variance or whatever, and give them some relief, because they're adjacent to a mixed use that's allowed in Cumru. That could happen, but, they're still going to have to go through that process in that township. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. That's, I actually have the same question about the township borders. Okay, moving on, the just a reminder, Board of Commissioners meeting is on the 17th at 7 o'clock. And our next meeting is on March 2nd at 6 o'clock. So is anything else?
I just wanted to make sure that the planning commission doesn't want to make any recommendations on any of the zoning hearing board applications to the Board of Commissioners.
Thank you. I was just about to say that. That's the purpose of having them on here. Does anybody have anything that they want to recommend that should be on the agenda for the Board of Commissioners? And to say, or that you want someone to go and speak on behalf or against or anything?
Just curious with prospectus with Harding Ave, why that was denied. Was that just a case of NIMBY or?
I guess they would need a special exception in Cumru in order to have that use.
I think what happened was the applicant probably applied for a zoning permit to use the property for that reason. And the zoning officer said, nope, sorry, you need a special exception. Your permit application is denied. Now submit a zoning hearing board application, which it looks like they've done.
Okay, thanks.
Exactly.
What about the kennel? The one on Wyomissing Road. It seems, I don't know, it doesn't seem as we had the whole story and not having seen the application. Does anybody have any concerns about that one?
We need to find out more what his intent is with that.
I'm not, Hattie, is there a zoning hearing already scheduled for?
It will be in February.
Oh, okay, all right, so. It looks like,
I don't have the posting or anything yet. Like it literally just came in on Friday.
Was the actual application part of what the planning commission received, or did they not put the application?
I don't think I put the application.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, unless we meet again before February 24th, you're gonna have to decide whether you want to recommend one way or another tonight.
Well, are they gonna specify what the use of the kennel is going to be for? Because if it's a personal use kennel, that's one issue, but if it's a boarding kennel, then they need to specify how many runs it's gonna be and how they're gonna take care of their waste and water. There's a lot of issues there, I believe, that need to be answered.
Could I beg forgiveness to run upstairs and grab the actual application and then we could look at it? If you give me 2 minutes to go grab it?
We'd really appreciate that.
Let me do that.
So it looks like, according to the application, there is a residence, a small barn, and a 12 by 20 private kennel is what they wrote on the application. It says the kennel operates under a Pennsylvania issued non-commercial kennel license and is subject to all inspections and rules that govern the license. Raymond and Emma, I'm assuming Raymond and Emma Brubaker, have been operating this kennel for many years at 506 School Road and only recently retired and moved to 1622 Wyomissing Road and kept a few dogs to continue a small, low-key operation to serve a few of their clients that they established over the years.
Sounds like a business to me.
So the property has 11 acres. Brecknock did have to issue zoning approval pursuant to a zoning decision, so they had to ask for some sort of relief. They're looking for dimensional variances because of the acreage. And they're asking for a parking variance because there won't be any employees and there won't be more than 10 adult dogs over the age of 12 weeks at any one time. And obviously the special exception for the use.
Is the entire parcel in Cumru? So like the buildings themselves and where the animals are gonna be at, or are they all in Cumru or all?
The hand-drawn map seems to suggest that the entirety of the kennel would be located in Brecknock, but again, it's not. I don't know.
So do the neighbors have to consent to this?
Neighbors can show up and oppose it if they want to, and become part of the, which means that they then have the right to ask questions, talk to them, and present their own testimony and exhibits and appeal right to it. But the zoning hearing board can grant an application over a neighbor's objection if they find that, the application and the testimony and evidence meets all the requirements to obtain either a special exception or a variance or whatever they're requesting. And it looks like a couple of neighbors did show up to Brecknock to oppose it.
Will the Brecknock neighbors be allowed to come to the Cumru meeting?
Yes, it's usually me. I send out a mailing to everybody 500 feet within, around the property. So regardless of which municipality they're in, because I just had some in Montrose and then, went into Spring and stuff. So everybody 500 foot of that property will get one of the notices mailed to them. And then at that time, yes, as the attorney said, they can show up and they can ask questions, they can be a party of it, they can testify, and again, based on standing, whether they, have something to say about it.
Kelsey, does the application include beyond the use? So they're asking for a special exception approval for the use. Then they're also asking for variances. What are the specific variances that they're asking for in Cumru Township?
Yeah, but 402D, 832B and C, which I believe is the kennel specification.
That would be the use.
Parking.
Oh, okay.
So the special exception approval pursuant to 402C13 to permit the private kennel to exist. 832.1B and C and 402D supplemental matrix chart 1.
That would be dimensional.
Yeah,
And then the 832 is like the supplemental related specifically to kennels. What's that one? Specifically, what? Okay, it just cites a section.
and then also 1004R supplemental matrix chart 11, which deals with parking.
Yeah, 832.1 refers to private kennels. It's specific requirements.
So what's the specific one from the supplemental, the 830 series?
It's for private kennels. And it has some design standards and specifications such as 10 acres.
They're asking for relief from something in that section. What are those?
Those are, again, the design standards regarding the size of the land. It has to be an accessory use to the residential use, no more than 10 dogs, and then specifications on the exterior areas and hours of operation.
What don't they meet in that section? Do we know? You can't tell.
Actually, I think it possibly could be is it possibly the 10 acres?
Did somebody say the lot was like 11 though?
But
it's not, but it's
It's two parcels.
Gotcha. So it's not 10 in Cumru. Without knowing more about this, I mean, I'd be reluctant to offer formal support. I think I'd stay kind of out of it, honestly, but that's just my opinion.
It looks like the Brecknock zoning hearing board did include a lot of conditions in their zoning decision and order regarding cleaning up feces, stormwater runoff, no signs advertising the kennel, having adult individuals present at all times when the dogs are outside on the runs, random inspections without notice twice a year are permitted by the township. The applicant can't keep more than 12 adult dogs at the property.
I guess I would say then if we're going to recommend anything, and again, this is without having much background on this at all. The conditions that you just cited from Brecknock all sound like good ones. So I think I would just want to make it clear that in the event that the zoning hearing board from Cumru would approve it, it would be conditioned, those same conditions would apply, you know, in Cumru Township. You know, they wouldn't be restricted to just Brecknock, and I think we just make sure that it kind of covers everything.
Yeah, I mean, they have, you know, they've got to be at least 200 feet from all street right of ways and lot lines. They need screening, no animals outside on the runs from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. So it looks like they gave it some thought.
Actually, some of the Cumru's restrictions are, they're more strict. They only allow 10 dogs in Cumru, and I think, some of the hours of operation are a little different as well. But to your point, yes, Steve, if there's a lot of conditions already, then, they should continue to be imposed, if not increased.
My concern with the 205 Church Road is right now they have, the zoning allows for 8 and they took in a 9th one, and I, you know,
They
I-
received the notice of violence.
did they? Okay. I don't see a problem with Harding to a group home. I don't, have a problem with that.
Is anybody planning on making a motion, or should we just let the zoning hearing board handle it?
My only question on the, my missing road project, would a surveyed plan be required to be presented to the zoning hearing board?
No.
It would be helpful.
It's not required.
I don't think at this point we should make a recommendation or declination either way to the zoning hearing board, because we don't have quite enough information.
Also, I will note too, at the Brecknock hearing, Ms. Young was in attendance, so I think she'd probably speak for us. All right, anything else? All righty, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.